Welcome in to the third episode of the Nerds Ruin Sports podcast. My name is Zac Tipton. I am here with my once again amazing co-host Anders Pryor. Anders, how are you doing today?
I'm great. For in honor of the draft, the past couple of days and the Knicks going full in on Nova, I wore my proud alumni T-shirt right there. Um,
Love that.
I think I bought this junior year. This is like my favorite shirt from the school, so I figured I had to pull it out if we're going to be talking about this.
Oh, absolutely. I think we'll definitely be talking. And as Anders alluded to, the NBA draft was this past couple of days, and it did not disappoint in terms of content and uh, scandals and stuff like that. It definitely did not disappoint. So we are going to jump into that, but I think what we really want to start with here is that top 5 to 10 picks, because that's obviously the key of the draft. A lot of the big stars, and in most drafts, in NBA drafts, a lot of the big stars come from that top 10. Um, and so, Anders, I just want to break down our top 10 here. So to start, just kind of looking at, so to start here, the first overall pick was Zachary Risache out of France. And then it went Alex Sarr second to the Wizards, Reed Shepherd third to the Rockets, Stephon Castle fourth to the Spurs, Ron Hall in the second fifth to the Pistons. The Hornets took Tijani Saloon out of France at 6. Donovan Clingan, who was considered to be a possible number 1 pick, fell to 7 to the Trailblazers. The Spurs selected Rob Dillingham, then immediately traded him to Minnesota for basically nothing. And then the Grizzlies took Zach Edey in a kind of a surprise pick at 9. And then Cody Williams went 10 to the Jazz. So those were the first 10 picks. And Anders, what were your biggest surprises there in the first 10 picks? What are your thoughts on it? Obviously, you kind of assumed Sarr would fall to 2 based on what we were hearing, but what were your biggest surprises?
When I think of the top 10, there are, I would say, 4 big sort of points that I kind of like imagine and think of that kind of stick with me the most from the night. So number 1 is that I feel really bad for Hawks fans. Not because of having anything to do with Risache. I think Risache is a perfectly fine player. I do think that I believe very strongly that Sarr was and is the best player in the draft. I think that he had the most kind of immediately impactful blend of size, speed, one-on-one defensive athleticism, and finesse. I think his ceiling is higher. I think he is less of a project than Risache. And I think if the Hawks are looking to go into the direction where they are, instead of using this number 1 pick to rebuild, are rather going to use it to try and bolster their roster, to try and make a push to be more firmly in the playoffs this upcoming year, Sarr, I think, could make more immediate contributions versus Risache is more of a longer runway player that I think would have been more appropriate for a team like the Wizards at 2. But obviously we have this kind of weird ongoing saga with Sarr's agent not really wanting him to play in Atlanta, which is kind of bizarre because Atlanta, I view as such a infinitely better situation in a better location with a better roster and a significantly better coach in Quinn Snyder. So I don't really understand. So I feel bad, so the Wizards fans should be very happy because they got the best player in the draft at 2. That's the first point. Well, I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. So I've not been into this, like the stuff going on at the top recently, so I did not know the stuff about Sarr. I knew he didn't want to go to the Hawks, but I wasn't sure if he just wanted to go to the Wizards more or if he just didn't want to go to the Hawks.
Right.
And so thank you for letting me know that. Now I know he doesn't want to go to the Hawks. makes sense.
Right.
Are you shocked they didn't trade out of one? I feel like if you're not gonna get Sarr, I feel like you should trade out of one. Do you think that just no one was offering for it, or what are your thoughts on what was going on there?
I'm not sure. I think like I look at the team, like I could have definitely foreseen a situation in which, Portland gives them 7-14. Obviously that would have not included the Denny Abdia trade that would eventually happen anyway. So obviously that became off the table, but that was a package that I think could have been realistic. I think, there were a handful of teams. I think there were talks about the Grizzlies wanting to trade up to 3 with Houston to draft Klingon. Obviously, if they traded up to number 1, they wouldn't have had to worry about either 1 or 2, kind of snagging him before. So I'm not really sure. I think there are a lot of teams with multiple picks, and so
it was a crazy draft for sure. It felt like every pick was getting traded. It really did. Yeah. That is like the NBA draft in a nutshell. But this I think even more than usual. Yeah. But
the second kind of point was, and this is a very kind of small of the four. I love Ron Holland. I think he's super fun and really exciting. I don't know if he really kind of stylistically is good for the Pistons because Ron Holland is a rangy, hyper athletic, kind of cutting wing, which the Pistons already have a lot of. The Pistons, what they desperately sort of needed was shooting. And so, Holland doesn't really feel that need. He kind of just adds another variation of what they already have. And I think that Holland, for the inverse, I think Holland would thrive in a place that already has a couple of, maybe not established shooters, but high upside shooters that can at least pull the floor in. There's not really, the spacing for Detroit is, I think, gonna, despite upgrading the roster in a vacuum with Holland, might even look worse. So that kind of sucks.
Do you think not having a coach at the draft probably caused that? Or do you think that was kind of who they were going to go for anyway? What are your thoughts?
It's probably hindered a lot. It's the answer is it's a pretty strong yes. I think it's a very culminating yes. I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I also think you have to think that Monty Williams is part of the draft scouting process.
Right.
A big part of it. And so you have to think that some of the guys that maybe were his top guys, he maybe sold them to think were his top guys. So maybe Ron Holland was a Monty Williams guy that maybe that they kind of kept and stuff. But now that Monty Williams isn't there, it's kind of like he was already kind of top of their board.
Because Ron Holland was slowly, you and I talked about this, Ron Holland was slowly falling down boards, little bit pick by pick. And he ended up coming in at number 5, which is kind of what he was averaging out at. So it ended up being good for him anyway.
I want to make a quick point here on I really like I think Reed Shepherd to me was like the number 2 on my board kind of thing. I was really high on Reed Shepherd, so I think the Rockets got a great guy at number 3 there. But I really like the Spurs taking Stephon Castle at 4. I think that's a really good pick for them. I think he's a really good player. I watched him a lot. I watched him a lot at UConn this past year.
Yep.
I think he's a really good player for them at 4. But I kind of want to go to my main kind of surprise here was. And this is why when we were talking about who I think won the draft later,
right?
This is why I'm going to say Minnesota, but Rob Dillingham at 8. This would have been a perfect pick for the Spurs. This was a perfect pick for the Spurs. This was the guy that was going to make that team kind of scary going forward. He is such a good, with his ability to score, kind of helping Wembanyama and stuff, he would have been a perfect asset for the Spurs. I'm kind of shocked they traded him away to the Timberwolves for what feels like next to nothing. I mean, it was a 2031 first and a 2030 pick swap. That was the trade. Like, it doesn't make sense to me on that. And the Wolves moved up 17 picks for basically nothing and got who I think is one of the best scorers in the draft and is going to immediately help their team and put them in a position where they can possibly go win the West next year pretty nicely with that scoring that they're going to have from him.
I think the line of logic there, and I am also surprised. It wasn't one of the big four things that I wrote down. And we are going to talk about the Wolves when we talk about winners, but I think the line of logic there, and you're the Wolves fan here, so you tell me if you agree with me or not. They gave up so much capital to get Rudy Gobert over a course of time that they know that as long as Anthony Edwards continues on this trajectory, they will never be in a situation that allows them to get someone like Rob Dillingham in the draft. And the reason that the pick is so late, I mean, part of it is strategy because they don't really have to worry about it for that long. So it's not really a relevant part of their kind of long-term, points of project. But also, it's probably one of the only picks that they had that was even available.
And that's the thing. That's fine, but I'm sure San Antonio had multiple other calls for that pick. Why would you accept that if you're San Antonio? That's way less than what you should be getting for that pick, especially with Rob Dillingham. That's way less than what you should be getting, and he's a perfect fit for your team. And so I just am like, I don't understand that move by San Antonio. It was a fantastic move by Minnesota. Like, are you kidding? Like, we gave up next to nothing for, like I said, one of the best scorers in the draft. And that was the one thing we needed coming into this draft was scoring. And obviously we'll talk about them a little later because they got another guy that I really like in this draft later on. But that's incredible. Like, it was a genius. Like, Chris Finch, well done, my guy. Like, not Chris Finch, but Chris Finch and that whole Wolves staff. Like, well done. Like, just applause to you.
Yeah, I see all the memes online about Greg Popovich going to the 12 and under basketball travel team camps to scout the first round pick that they're gonna use in 2030.
They're gonna use in 2031. Yeah, no, it's like
I want to round out our biggest surprise of the top 10 conversation with two big, literally topics, which is Klingon and Donovan Klingon, who you mentioned earlier, and then Zach Edey going at 9 to the Grizzlies. Because I had kind of pointed out before the rumors that Grizzlies wanted to trade up to get Klingon. You mentioned that you were surprised by Klingon falling. I personally wasn't. Here, the reason being that I felt comfortable that predicting that regardless of what the order was, that the first two picks are going to be Reese Shea and Sarr in either order. From there, though, it started to get tricky because we knew that the Rockets were not going to draft a center because they already have Smith Jr. and Sengun. And we knew that the Spurs were not going to take one at either 4 or 8 because they have Wemby and they want to establish that they're not going to draft Klingon to have him be the backup center. That doesn't make any sense. So then you would kind of have to rely on this like stretch of 5, 6, 7 Detroit, Charlotte, and Portland to kind of scout out and see what would be happening. And then, Detroit, they have Duren and Stewart, and the understanding was that if they drafted Cleveland, they would have to trade one of them. And then, so in my kind of like mocking that I did, the final prediction that I made was that Klingon would go 6 to Charlotte. They went with Salon instead, which I personally disagree with. I would have gone with Klingon there. I think his floor is much higher. And so I was not incredibly surprised that if he didn't go in the top 2, that he was going to fall to that kind of territory. But I want to get your thoughts on Edey, because it doesn't really surprise me that much, because if you really look at it, we understood that the scope of where Edey was going was somewhere between 10 and 20, and that was kind of his range of outcomes. We all knew that the biggest need for Memphis is a center, and Edey was the best one available, because after that, the next kind of grouping was like Ware, Filipowski, Deron Holmes, Yves Missi. Edey is better than all of those names that I just listed. So, I mean, from a positional need standpoint, I think the pick makes a lot of sense, even if the specific number of pick that he went kind of threw people off a little bit.
I see what you mean there. I just think, for me personally, like, I like Zac Tipton, but I look at Zac Tipton as a guy that, like, was good in college, and everyone's asking the same question: will it translate? Will it translate? Will it translate? I am shocked he went that high. I'm kind of shocked teams were that high on him to begin with, just because personally, like, he seemed like a guy that was destined to fall a little bit, in my personal opinion. Because he's not young either, right? He was in college for 4 years.
No. Yeah.
He was in college for 4 years, basically, or 3, whatever it was. I'm just kind of surprised he did kind of go as early as he did, just because of all the kind of the taboo talks surrounding him about, like, he kind of was like kind of the same book as, like, is it gonna translate? And usually when players are that good in college, people asking her, is it gonna translate? They usually don't go that high in the draft.
Especially now that he's probably going to a team where he's going to be asked to potentially start. Can he kind of build up his mobility fast enough to kind of adjust to that, where it is a realistic?
You cut out on me. So continue, Anders. Sorry, we had a little
little technical issue there. Zac Edey was walking by and he messed with the signal. But no, I think the question is, now that he's in a position where he might have to, where he's probably, there's going to be a realistic shot that he starts alongside Jared Jackson Jr. Can he gain that mobility kind of fast enough and high at a high enough level to where he can adjust to sort of diving headfirst into a situation in a way that he might not have to if he got drafted to, OKC at 12 or something like that, or the Raptors at 19, for instance. So it's going to be now. Thankfully, remember the Grizzlies are picking 9, not because they suck, because the roster is bad. They were picking 9 because they had 13 players miss, I think, double-digit games that year. So, he's going to enter a good roster. He's going to get good coaching with Taylor Jenkins. Excuse me. So, I think he's walking into actually a pretty solid and comfortable situation. I think we'll be fine.
Yeah. So that was our top 10 picks. We'll kind of come back to it a bit, because I'm guessing they'll probably be part of our next couple segments. There's some guys in the top 10 as well. But we're going to move on to our first, question for you here, Anders, and question for us. We're going to go winners and losers from this draft, Anders.
Yep.
And I'm going to all start because I've kind of already mentioned who mine is based on how we did that first round pick. But I'll start. For me, it's the Timberwolves. And there wasn't really a question on that. I say day one also just because simply I'm going to be honest here. I've told you guys in the past, I'm not very knowledgeable with European and G League prospects. And so guys that went in the second round, I don't know a lot of them. So I'm going to say day one. I don't know a lot of guys that went in the second round. I'm saying the Timberwolves simply because, listen, they got one of the best players for them possibly they could have got for basically nothing. And then they drafted in the second and they drafted in the late in that first round. They stuck with their pick and took Terrence Shannon Jr. at 27. And I'm very, very happy with this pick for the Timberwolves. I think Terrence Shannon is a stud. I think he's a really good offensive player that can score. Just he can go downhill quick. He's one of those downhill guards. He's got great size on athleticism. His defense is pretty solid too. Like he's got good instincts and stuff. But I just really like this pick for the Timberwolves. I think this was a great pick for them. A little bit older, a little on the older side. He's older than me, so that's when you know they're older. But like I think that's usually a good pick for them, and I think I can't say anything bad about the Timberwolves day one of the draft. I think this was the perfect day one for them. And they also then were able to also trade Wendell Moore. I don't know if they did that day one or if they did that day two. They traded Wendell Moore, who was young, and got rid of his contract for the 37th overall as well. So I think that's just a good move for them.
I agree. I have 4 teams listed. I know that you and I agree on the Timberwolves pretty strongly. I love Terrence Shannon. I think it's good for him because he is a little older in the spectrum of the draft, but when he enters in, like he is going to be essentially the same age as Ant. And so their timeline together is kind of perfect. They sort of sync really well in terms of where they are. Terrence, because he's been in college for so long, he's put in a lot of natural muscle, and so he kind of fits a lot of the Wolves are a very big team, both in terms of stature and in just like build. And it's in positionally, it makes sense as well because, outside of Jay McDaniels, the only really like wings that they've had like this past year that gave them real proper minutes was like Kyle Anderson. And so they just kind of need someone that can come off of the bench and sort of be able to score in multiple fashions rather than just a kind of like retread gadget guys, and someone that is still young enough to where he can like I said, like being on the same timeline as and kind of build with them and sort of, and if you're doing if you want to do a long build with Ant and have him be the centerpiece, getting younger pieces to fill in those bench spots, I think is really key. And so I think he will be very suited to that. And then obviously the Dillingham thing, that explains itself. He's going to come in and contribute right away, and he'll step right in. And it's whenever Conley is done, he whenever that is, for whatever reason, he will step in and start right away. So I'm with you there. I thought they had a very, very strong night.
100%. I think most people thought that. I think that's like kind of the national thought as well, as that the Timberwolves had maybe one of the best draft nights of the entire draft. So for you, then you had 4 winners.
Yeah.
So here's some of your others.
The first one I'll mention of the 3 is one that I know that you and I talked about before the show that we agree on, which is the Spurs. And you would obviously mention Castle. The Spurs, they just need wings. Like that's really what they needed. They already they have in the backcourt, Johnson and Vassell, you can get by with that. The issue was the wing play about like Zach Collins, Sadai Osman. Like that's not really like there was no real like substance. Like there were certain points, like if it was this year or the previous year, but like Kendon Bates Diop was like getting like legitimate minutes like at the wing spot. And so they add Castle, who can shoot the 3 effectively. He can defend. He's he is like, I mean, obviously very different positions, very different builds, but he is very similar to Sarr in that for his wingspan, he is a very athletically refined one-on-one defender. And he is a very clear frame that can be continued to built out.
Absolutely.
And I'm super excited to see that. And then I thought their second round was good too, because again, in the backcourt, they have people that can score in Johnson and Vassell, but they don't really have like a kind of pure classic point guard facilitator. That's where I think Juan Nunez comes in. The ringers comp for him was JJ Barea. I think that's spot on. He's someone that can, as they continue to build out the bench with the capital that they develop over the years, he is someone who can come up. He's played a mature, refined style of European basketball and can bring the ball up the floor with confidence. And then they also got someone else who just missed the cut for me on my NBA underrated steals of the draft thing that we did a bit ago, which is Harrison Ingram, who I think has a ton of athleticism that is still pretty untapped, in terms of how UNC used him. And he's going to be entering really young, but also with a bunch of muscle. And so I think the positional versatility that he provides defensively will show right away. And I think he'll be a very pleasant surprise. And I think he could be an underrated candidate to be a starter at some point within the next 2 years.
I agree. I think the only thing that worries me about Castle is his shooting needs a lot of work. He shot 27% from three while he was at UConn last year, and he just needs a lot. And as a wing from behind the arc, it's really important, especially when you're kind of with Wemby, who's going to control the paint, and so you need scorers on the outside. That worries me a little with Castle, but I agree. I think obviously Harrison Ingram and I think Juan Nunez. I think those guys are all great second round picks for them.
Yeah.
So I feel like what Spurs did.
I'll wind back what I said. I refer to him as a relatively effective shooter. That does not imply at all that that's the strength of his game. That was nothing about that is kind of pushing him forward of why he's being picked fourth. It's having to do with defensive athleticism, around the rim athleticism, stuff like that.
100%. No, I agree. I think his athleticism is great. I mean, I think he'll be really good for them. Obviously, I like the Spurs draft class, so I'm not going to say anything bad there. But I think
I'm going to look at his true shooting percentage real quick. I want to see. Hold on. His true shooting percentage. 55.1. Okay, that's not it's not great. It's not, Tijan Salon, who was 6, he's at 52.8, Dillingham, 59.5. That's actually a little lower than I expected. He's not, if you look at other people in that kind of in the lottery that were more regarded for their shooting than he is, he's not, they're higher, but they're not quite as higher up as your eye test would expect. So there's definitely there's room to be done, but it's not like I wouldn't call him a project as a shooter. I wouldn't put him in that kind of category the way I would for other people in the lottery.
I agree. I know you have a couple more. I'm gonna bring up one of mine here. Me personally, one of mine that I really like, and it's only for this one pick because I don't think they have many other picks. But on the Bulls Samira winner, Matas Buzelis already seems like he's already kind of become a fan favorite in the NBA. I don't know if you've seen. I just feel like he's been kind of become a fan favorite. A lot of people really like the kid. And he's kind of going home. He's going to be a hometown kid now. He's from Chicago. He's going back to Chicago. And I personally like Matas Buzelis. I like he has a bit of cockiness to him that can kind of be a little scary, but also just you gotta have some cockiness at that point. But I just really like that pick for Chicago and him falling to them at 11. I really like that pick for them.
No, I like it too. No, I thought between him and Holland, but the two main G League Ignite guys, I found him to be more kind of impressive. I thought that the body control that he has in transition, given his wingspan, I think is really impressive and really unique. I think he's a really strong finisher. I think he, sort of is similar to Castle, where And I would actually even consider him a little maybe a step above in the shooting category than Castle. He's not a shooter, like if we're going to use that like phrase in quotations, but he can shoot. But the transition stuff, the athleticism, the body control, the kind of spatial awareness that he has, that's kind of what stuck out to me. And so I agree 100%. I am. If you told me that he fell outside the top, I think it's ridiculous. I agree with you. In terms of just the individual steals, like for one player and just in comparison, I do think that's up there for me as well. I think the single biggest winner of the night, just for me, is Utah. They got at 10, they got Cody Williams, they got Isaiah Collier at 29, and they got Kyle Filipowski at 32. Ended up falling out of the first round entirely. And you guys remember that was one of the people that I kind of picked as like one of my sleepers. That they got 3 of what could potentially end up as 3 of the 20 best players in this draft. Like in 2 years, when we do like those like redraft things, when we look back on draft classes, they might have gotten 3 of the 20 best players just at picks that were, kind of spread out. And so I thought they did a great job. I know, Cody Williams was the candidate to go top 5. I know that he was connected to Detroit a little bit. Collier, he fell a little bit. I know he was kind of in that sort of 19 to Toronto to 22 to the Suns sort of range. So he fell to them. I thought that was great. And then obviously Filipowski, I think stylistically for Will Hardy is a perfect backup for a Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler front court. So I thought that they did a fantastic job. I thought that they were the biggest winners just in terms of start to finish draft picks. And then the other winner, not as big of a winner, but someone that I think that I did an under the radar job, I think were the Heat. They got Khalil Ware, who I think has, one of the more impressive players in the draft test in terms of physicality and being able to play well in contact. I think that he's going to fit in right in with what Eric Spoelstra does there. I think he has, in terms of a one-on-one post game, I think that was something that he got better at over the year at Indiana and that he can continue to improve. And I think that Bam is the perfect person to sit behind for that. And then they also got Peel Larson, who I think is, from Arizona, very athletic shooter, a lot of upside. Again, little skinny now, but broad enough shoulders and, with the kind of whole body, can fill out a little bit to come off the bench, hit threes, be streaky, kind of, provide them a little bit of a shooting spark that they've kind of missed since Strus has left. I think he can kind of come in and sort of reignite that role a little bit. So they were someone I wanted to shout out as well.
Yeah, and I think absolutely. I have like 2 more kind of want to mention just out of the blue here, kind of teams I like. The Knicks are one of those, and just the Knicks are simply because I like the fact that they got 5 second-round picks for their 1 pick, like their late first-rounder. They got 5 second-rounders for it. That's just a great move for them in terms of getting draft capital. I do like Kolek in the second round for them as well. So I really like that pick in there, and I like, obviously did Dottie I don't know anything about. Andrew just told me kind of a little about him, but obviously he's a project guy, so I don't know much about that. But I don't think the Knicks had a terrible draft there. I don't think they're one of the worst. I kind of like I like the trade they made, and I like getting Kolek in the second round for them. To me, I think a winner you have to consider just right now is Washington. They got Sara too, which is, like Andrew said, was the best prospect in the draft. Kind of falls to them at 2. And then they got Bub Carrington at 14. I like Bub. I think he's a good player. I think that's a good pick for them at 14. And then I don't like the guy. I don't think he's that great, but I know Anders Oh, I think we have technical difficulties again.
Now you're back. I see you.
Yeah. Where was I at when I cut off?
You were
I'm sorry.
talking about Tyshawn George and how I'm in love with him and you despise him.
Yes. Okay. There we go. Yeah. But they did get him later on, and so I think Anders, obviously, they land two of Anders' as favorite players in the draft, and Alex Sarr and Tyshawn George. And obviously, I think Bub Carrington's adds to that. So I think Washington definitely had a good class.
It's ironic, actually, because sandwiched in between them, I actually am not as big of a Bub Carrington person. I think he's a little kind of gadgety, and he is really young, and so I think the process of kind of like he doesn't really, his frame doesn't really come across as one that can be built into. But I mean, obviously, my opinion there is in the minority. But yes, no, George was someone that I really think is perfect for a team like the Wizards that don't have that much of a win now. They have a very long runway, and I think a lot of the immediate production burden will be placed on Sarr's shoulders, and that can give George the time that he really needs to just get reps and develop and get stronger, like we had talked about.
Absolutely. And then Anders, we're going to move on now to the
Yep.
biggest losers. I don't really have a team. I don't know enough about most of these players. I think for me, if I had to say like a biggest loser for me, I'd probably say I'm going to stick with the fact that it's probably either the Hawks or the Pistons. I just think the Hawks, Risa Shea isn't an inspiring number one pick.
Right.
I don't think he's an inspiring number one pick at all. And I find it very hard to believe that. And then I think obviously you talking about Ron Holland. I don't think that was an inspiring pick either for the Pistons at 5. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, Anders. I'd love to hear who you think maybe are some losers of this draft, who you think maybe just very much disappointed.
Yeah, I think actually, the Hawks I would agree with. I think but that's more of just like the basis of an opinion. I mean, to me, if they pick Sarr, they'd be a winner of the draft. So, that's. I will say though, one team, and this is kind of ironic coming from me and what I've said before on the show. I actually think that one of the losers to me in the draft was the Bucks, because I think that they took AJ Johnson at 23, and then Tyler Smith, who I had mentioned previously in the show as a sleeper, at 33 to open up the second round. I was under the impression, because Johnson had come into the combine not really known, not really on anyone's board, and then kind of shot up, but shooting up 15 spots from the bottom kind of puts you in like the low 40s, and that's where I think they would have gone. I was kind of surprised. I think if the Bucks wanted AJ Johnson at 33, they could have easily gotten him. I don't really see anyone in that kind of 10 or 11 pick span following them that would have really targeted him. And so I thought it was kind of a waste of a pick. No, they got Smith, who I would have been fine with them taking at 23. There are a couple other players around 23 that I think were better. I think that Smith was more reserved for the 27 to 30 range in the draft to a team that is kind of contending now and kind of has their corners that we need him to produce right away. But if they went with him there, that no one would have batted an eye with, that people would have viewed it as a reasonable pick. I thought that AJ Johnson going at 23 instead of getting someone who they might have liked more than Smith at 23 and then saving Johnson for 33 in the second, I thought optically it was kind of weird. And so that was the one that kind of stuck out to me as very bizarre throughout the night. And so I'll go with them as my biggest loser.
Absolutely. And I think I'm going to say I might actually go here. I might actually say a player specifically as a loser. And that to me very simply is I think is Nicholas, I was gonna Dalton Connect falling to 17. Anders, you called this. You said on our last show. This is so Anders is the winner of the draft, but Dalton Connect is unfortunately not. Anders said in our last show, he was like, I asked him specifically who's gonna have the Cam Whitmore like fall, and Anders was like, I think Dalton Connect. And what happened? Dalton Connect went from being a top 7 or 10 prospect to falling all the way to 17 to the Lakers. And now I don't think the Lakers are a terrible landing spot for him, but it's definitely not ideal. I wouldn't want to land under the Lakers. I'm a player. But I had to be teammates with Bronny now. Like, come on, that's just a disappointing.
Yeah, I think ironically, I think it's thanks, the winner. That's a strong. That's you calling me a winner. There is better than being your amazing co-host or or outstanding or whatever you want to throw at me. But I think it's funny because I think it's actually it makes surprisingly from a basketball standpoint makes a lot of sense because the Lakers now at the tail end of LeBron's career kind of need. I think the questions about their depth are legitimate. I've been very pessimistic. You know this. We've talked about this off the show. I have a very pessimistic perspective of the Lakers roster construction. I don't think it's a very well constructed roster. But for the tail end of LeBron's career, you want someone who can contribute more so right away. And Dalton Connect probably it's either him at 1 or a second to Klingon has the highest floor in the draft and can be the most immediately sort of impactful. And I think that the Lakers sort of want that, because he is in a lot of ways, he's an adult basically. By the time his rookie contract ends, he's going to be 27 years old. So he can come in very mature, very experienced, very refined, very calibrated, and can come in and be himself sort of immediately instead of having to be this like slow build where by the time he gets to the first iteration of himself as a relatively finished project, LeBron's retired, and so his contribute. So I actually, surprisingly, even though I got it right, I actually think basketball wise it kind of works for both sides.
And then absolutely. And then do you have any other losers you want to bring up? Is there anything else you want to kind of talk about there on that side? Otherwise, no. There's one person we listed in our steal list that we haven't talked about yet, and I kind of wanted to talk about him just quickly. I think he landed in a really good spot for him, and that's Baylor Shireman landing at 30 to the Celtics. I think that's a perfect spot for him personally. I think he's going to be instantly able to help the shooting of the Celtics again and kind of be that guy. A really good depth piece for them. But I really like that move for Shireman. Do you agree, Anders? Do you think that's a really good landing spot for him?
No, I do because, really off the bench, you now have three kind of just pure shooters off the bench now. You had Pritchard and Hauser beforehand, and now you're adding Shireman, and you only really need, using the phrase like going off, you only really need one of them to really go off in a full sense for the bench to have a collectively productive night. And so they're just kind of adding another similar piece with similar strength. So now not only do their bench has a clear identity, but then also it puts less pressure because some people, you can make the argument, well, can the Celtic, how long are Pritchard and Hauser going to be able to keep this kind of productivity with these many minutes, et cetera, et cetera? You get, like now Shireman can come in and now there's more kind of margin for error from the other two. And so they all complement each other really well. And it just makes sense too, because, Porzingis is probably not going to play to open the year, and Horford, may be on the verge of retirement. Even if he doesn't retire, his minutes are going to continue to be limited. So you just need people to be in the rotation, and Shireman, has an identity as a player that fits in with the makeup of the team that already exists, especially coming from the bench. And so I think that it's about as good of a landing spot for him, given where he was projected. 27, which I believe, 30. He was picked 30. That was about the highest he could go. I think he kind of, in the days before the draft, solidified himself as a 27 to 35 range. I think that that's about the best landing spot he could have got.
Absolutely. No, 100%. And so I think for me, I really like that move. And obviously, he's a player near and dear to my heart. South Dakota State represent.
Right. Yeah.
Obviously, it says Creighton next to his name, but South Dakota State represent all the way. But no, so I just saw that move for him. And so now we go on our topic that, to be honest, it's never really a fun topic to have, but we got to have the topic of conversation because it's kind of a media war zone no matter where you go with it. And that is Bronny James. Bronny James was officially drafted by the Lakers, a move that no one saw coming. Literally everybody saw it coming. I'm guessing it was like a negative 1,000 bet if you wanted to actually do that. Bronny James at 55 to the Lakers. He officially joins LeBron, all that stuff. And so I want to take you guys to a tweet, or not to a tweet, but to a statement from Woj about the whole situation because he obviously kind of has something to say on it. I disagreed with what he said to say on this, but I'm kind of going to show. Anders doesn't really know. I'll show it. 1 second here. This is it. We'll show that. So this is. I want to make sure. Can you see this, Anders? Can you see this?
Oh, I sure can.
Okay, so this is what Woj said. People talking about nepotism. The NBA is full of nepotism. The ownership level, front office, coaching. I don't want to hear about it all of a sudden because Bronny James' father plays for the Lakers. It is rampant in this league. And so that was Woj's comment online after this pick. And it was, to be honest with you, I had a personal issue with this, just from Woj's perspective, because I look at it as Woj is basically paid in information to spread good stuff about every team that he basically has to get spread, because that's Woj's job. Is like if he spreads good news and good, if he writes good about teams, they reward him in information and him being like a top analyst. And so I look at this as like, I just think it's so not like, I don't even really care about like the fact that maybe other teams do nepotism. What we're seeing at the Lakers organization right now is insane. Listen, I don't care that you draft. I don't care that you hire his podcast co-host friend as a head coach. But to pair that now with drafting his son, who was definitely not the 55th best player in the draft, he was not a top 60 player in this class. He probably should have been an undrafted signing if you're going to do it that way and like go to a summer league team. Fine, whatever. This is crazy. I don't like the Woj statement there. And I think it's very hypocritical coming from him. And so yeah, but I don't know. Anders, do you have a comment?
So I think the word hypocritical is very appropriate because I think that for Bronny specifically, I like Bronny. I don't believe that this iteration of him is ready for the NBA, and I've made that very clear. I don't think that, the reality of the situation is that he was coming off the bench and averaging less than 5 points a game on a losing team. And there is no one else in this draft, as far as I'm concerned, that fits that description. And so this iteration of him is not
George. Oh,
George started average close to 10. And, again, I think the project the project.
No, that's fair.
But for Bronny, this is a totally different end of the spectrum.
No, 100%.
I want what's best for Bronny because I think he's a good kid and I think that he has some really good traits. Like he played at the All-American, he played at McDonald's All-American. Like he clearly has some aptitude to him. I think that for him, like the college, staying in college would have been the best thing. And he's made it very clear that he kind of wants to come out of his own path. And this doesn't really seem like the right way to do that. I want what's best for him. And so I think I would have gone back to college. I would have kind of stayed in the villa because quite frankly, even if you treat these first 2 years of maybe being in the G League as like the next 2 years of college, there's a lot of coaching that he could have had access to in college that is better than what they're giving for the South Bay Lakers. So that's the part of it. I think that I want what's best for him, and I think that what's going best for him is going to college. But in terms of Woj's tweet specifically, I think the way that people talk about the nepotism part of it is hypocritical in general because when I've heard a lot, and I'm not saying that I'm not hearing anyone claiming that these are that it's a total coincidence. No one thinks that, but there are a lot of people that are saying, oh, he has all of these different traits. He deserves to get his name called tonight. And then when you look at, who he, if you look at the iteration of who he is right now, and, there's abundant proof that he is not NBA ready right now. Like flatly, he just isn't. And so when you point that out to people and you mention and you kind of factually direct towards the fact that it is the main root of this is nepotism, not the only root, but the main root of it, the response then becomes what Woj says, which is, oh, well, there's nepotism everywhere. So by him saying that, he's acknowledging that the main root is nepotism because you can't have it both ways. It can't be that he deserves to get his name called tonight on merit, regardless of who his dad is, or even if his dad wasn't LeBron, he would deserve to get his name called tonight, and then turn around and use there's nepotism everywhere in the NBA argument as sort of a counter to disproving the other side. Like those can't, right? Because otherwise bringing up that there's nepotism everywhere in the NBA, well, why would you say that if the main root of this isn't nepotism? And so I think it's kind of intellectually dishonest. I think that Bronny is getting either kind of unwarranted compliments. Not that the things that he's doing do not deserve compliments, but there are players in similar stature to him who are doing similar things that are not getting the same praise for him. Except, we're giving him the whole thing of like, oh, I went through the cardiac arrest, whatever. It's like, okay, so if he went through the cardiac arrest, then that does not mean that he's in the best condition to be playing. And also, players have gone through those kinds of events before and not get drafted and then overcome those to be better than what Bronny was right now, right? Like we saw what happened with I know I'm going on really long, Zach. I apologize. I want to get back to you, but like if you remember Keyshawn Johnson, when he collapsed at Florida, came back to Kansas State and balled out, averaged 16 points a game, and was incredibly effective.
There's a reason for that. He was one of the coolest stories.
Right, but that wasn't milked to this extent because Sean Johnson's dad is not LeBron, and you can say, well, Bronny is handling the pressure really well. It's like, well, all of these guys are. There are so many guys that are at that combine that they know are probably not going to get drafted that are taking the mature approach and are handling all of the media stuff the right way. but are not getting complimented accordingly because of their last name. And so I think there's a lot of intellectual dishonesty about it. And
like, I look at it like this. It's like I'm saying, at this point, if you go through this as well, at this point, would you rather have name a player that went undrafted, or Bronny James on your team right now? And I'm telling you right now, for most of the names we name, it's going to be the player that went undrafted. Like, for example, would you rather have Bronny James right now, or would you rather have Armando Bacot?
Armando Bacot.
Armando Bacot's going to be the answer. Would you rather have Bronny James, or would you rather have DJ Burns?
That's a good question. I'd have to think about that one. Well, I have one for you. Would you rather? Oh wait. Oh, there you are. I thought you froze again for a sec.
No, we're good.
Would you rather have Bronny James or PJ Hall?
PJ Hall.
PJ Hall.
Like it's for me. Like, I don't think he's a top 60 player in this class. I think there are other guys that deserve to probably get drafted over Bronny right now. And I think, like, here's the thing. If you don't draft Bronny and you sign him as like an undrafted free agent to your summer league team, and he balls out in summer league, or he plays well in summer league enough to get himself a contract, that's fine. You spent a draft pick on him. Right. I am telling you right now, nobody else in that draft was drafting Bronny.
You didn't need to get him on your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing. And also, the other thing I realized was saying me also is I'm sure you've seen it, but like Rich Paul, his agent, calling teams and basically like threatening them to like not draft Bronny. Yeah. Otherwise, he was gonna go to Australia and go play in Australia or something like that. I'm like, that was crazy.
It also like he's still technically in the transfer portal. If he's gonna recline from the draft, then why wouldn't he just go back to college instead of?
I think at this point, didn't he get rid of his college eligibility at this point?
I guess maybe, but
because once you hire an agent like full time or something like that, you're completely. I think you're out of. I think you're officially out and eligible.
The other thing too is because the arguments that I heard all of yesterday and all of today was, oh well, I don't want to hear about all of this. Why are you suddenly complaining about nepotism? Like you weren't complaining about it, when it was Thanasis getting drafted, or when it was like this assistant getting hired. And I was like, that's fair because we weren't complaining about it. But on the other hand, you guys were not praising it or complimenting the organization for doing it. So that goes both ways. So it's like you can't blame people for being inconsistent about when they criticize nepotism and when they don't, when you guys were also being selective of who you choose to kind of do the mental gymnastics for in terms of when this kind of stuff happens.
I have another tweet to share because personally I don't like this tweet. Although I will say I'm a big Nick Wright fan. I like Nick Wright. I think Nick Wright's actually really fun to listen to and stuff. But this tweet to me made me upset and I don't agree with it. And so I'm going to show it to you now. It's from Nick Wright. Is it here? I think it's here. Yeah, here it is. So here it is. Nick Wright tweets out, I have found the Bronny James coverage to be so wildly disingenuous and dishonest that I truly can't believe it. This is one of the coolest sports stories ever, and folks are letting their transparent dislike and jealousy of LeBron make them miss that point. That is absolutely not what is happening. I don't think anyone is like LeBron James is always going to hate. But the thing is, I don't think anyone's hating LeBron for this as much as we're hating he is getting like LeBron is getting hate for this. But I'm trying to figure out how I want to word this. But That's not what's happening. Well, what's happening here is that we don't care about the story. We care about the person getting drafted, and that person getting drafted is not good enough to be drafted.
Right.
And so I don't know what I don't know your thoughts are on that tweet, Anders, but I think that's a outrageous take to have. I don't think that's what's happening.
I do love LeBron. I'm giving everything that I'm saying as someone who takes the LeBron side of the GOAT debate. Like that's firmly where I stand. And I'm a big LeBron supporter. I'm in support of his mobility. I'm in support of his business ventures. I'm even in a certain extent in support of having him have a certain, not the majority of the say, but a piece of the say in terms of roster construction and coaching and stuff like that. But I think that but that doesn't, I do think that, every decision that he has made, it is within reasonable realm, like wanting Kyrie, but then, not everything here happened, like wanting Westbrook, wanting Kyrie, wanting Ty Lue, not all of those things happen, but those are all within the reasonable realms of things. And, in terms of the JJ thing, when JJ said I didn't talk about that until 30 minutes after, or whatever the exact quote was, I believe him when he says that. Like, just maybe not even out of like necessarily I'm taking that at the value that is, because it's coming directly from him, and he didn't really have the commentary, the opportunity to commentate on all that because of where he was affiliated and what he was up to and all that kind of stuff. But for this, like the principle of I don't know, it's I don't know. I think that again, the same, it's like what I said previously with how, it goes both ways versus selective criticism versus selective praise. It's the same thing here where I do think there is a group of people where LeBron's kind of critics would want to downplay the kind of really, and I think Nick Wright used the word cool, which I think is actually the most appropriate word to use for this story. But I do think that just, it goes the other way as well, where the critics will downplay it, but then at the same time, we've seen either this or similar things happen in other facets of the NBA and in sports, and it will not get either praised as much or defended from criticism as strongly. And again, and this is another part of this whole thing that I think gets under-discussed. If LeBron was not playing, if LeBron was not playing, then I think that there would be much less of a problem with this. Because remember, Scottie Pippen, right? Scottie Pippen Jr. went undrafted, was in that sort of same, obviously there wasn't any health stuff, and he was a much more statistically productive person, but in that sort of same fringe area that, there was a legitimate argument. Is Scottie Pippen Jr. ready for the NBA right now in the moment when he got on the Lakers roster? Or I believe the Lakers were the first team he went to, but excuse me. But Scottie Pippen not playing in the NBA. So there's no kind of strings attached sort of it, right? It's based off of name alone. And that's less kind of pure nepotism and more so kind of just this credibility kind of thing. That's what, and so no one was really upset about it. It was a cool story, but no one was really upset about it. Even if
it was the same thing as when Shareef O'Neal came into the league, right? Shaq's kid, he was kind of on the verge as well of possibly getting drafted / being undrafted as well.
Right.
He went undrafted. I think he's in the G League now. But
yeah,
same thing.
No, exactly. So the fact that LeBron is still currently in the league is kind of the ticker to what makes this different from those other things. And the fact that and even if it was a different organization and there was no kind of dark, sinister, like, oh, we're going to use him as a trade piece to manipulate them into giving us Austin Reeves or something. I do think that is what makes it different. Like I listened to the show today that tweet is from, and I forget what Steph Curry's son's name is, but if the Warriors 15, he said if the Warriors 15 years from now, they say, hey, he's a fringe guy, give him a shot. It's a cool story. We have the 58th pick and he's 71 on our board. We give him a shot. Except Curry's not going to be in the league at that point. So it then aligns more with the Pippen Jr. and Sharif O'Neal examples. You know what I mean?
100%. Oh, I 100% agree with you. So
I actually would have never thought of the Sharif O'Neal example, but I'm glad that you brought that up because it's a really good point.
Yeah, so I think for me, I think I don't know, it's bad. I don't like this situation at all, but it was bound to happen, right? We knew it was immediately when this happened, it was going to happen. So it happened. It happened. A lot more.
No one expected this media cycle to be 100% clean. No one expected that.
I'm not going to lie. I definitely used the joke. Have you heard the new scandal about LeBron James sleeping with new teammate Bronny James and mother a couple of times? I've definitely used that that joke a couple of times already. But no, listen, it's unfortunate, but it was bound to happen. And
I did think I will say this, and this this can be our last thing, or unless you have something else to say, but I will add this one brief point because you had brought up Rich Paul. I think calling other teams to tell them not to draft him or whatever, you can disagree with the methods of that, but we do see similar sort of things happen. I will say I did strongly dislike. I thought that the claims that he was making where Bronny cannot play on a two-way contract, I thought that was really entitled and kind of delusional. And because, again, two-way title, that would be a financial decision, not a playing decision, because Bronny can be taking up a roster spot and still be in the G League the entire year. But I thought that, the amount for 55th pick overall, not a lot of money anyway. The difference in that, it's not huge. So I thought that kind of throwing that in there was just very tone deaf and came across as bordering on spoiled by Rich Paul. And I know that he gets the benefit of a doubt for a lot of things of how things, but that really rubbed me the wrong.
No, absolutely. I think the whole thing was kind of just crazy. But I think
Bronny, a representative of Bronny's draft stature should not be making their own stipulations like that. That's ridiculous.
100%. Well, that's all we really have today. So I think we're going to probably end it there on our pod. It was a shorter one today, but that's also because honestly it's just the NBA draft pod. We will be back with you probably with another fantasy pod, I think is what we're going to probably do next. But eventually we'll get back to you guys with our normal content of news and stuff.
I think what we want to try and do is do a simulated. We're either going to do, just to give you guys a roadmap, we're going to, within the next few episodes, we're definitely going to be doing a mock draft together. Zach and I will decide what spots you want to pick from or do it randomly. We'll also probably at some point do like what we did with the sleepers, but we'll do a fade list in terms of people that we're trying to avoid that we think are overvalued. And then we'll probably look as we get closer and closer to the conclusion of all-star voting, do try to ramp up on some baseball content now that we have a kind of big sample to talk about.
It is officially the halfway mark in baseball, Anders, today. Today is officially the halfway mark
There
of
we
the
go.
season. And obviously your boy was at the 3 MLB games in a row. It was a long few days, I'm not gonna lie. The traveling that went into that, but it was fun. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday going to baseball games is always a great time, and I met a lot of really cool people and watched Twins win 2 or 3. So I'm really hyped with that. So, but anyway, we'll be back for you guys very soon. And on behalf of my great co-host Anders Pryor, I am Zac Tipton, and this has been the Nerds Ruined Sports Pod NBA Draft Edition. And we will see you all very shortly. Thank you.
We'll see you soon.